Hello and welcome to Azam Sharp Weekly. In this video, I like to compare two different frameworks, the SwiftUI framework and the Flutter framework for building cross-platform applications. And you'll see that if you have worked in Flutter or if you have worked in SwiftUI, the similarities are insane. I mean, it looks very, very similar. So if you are using SwiftUI, you can easily jump onto the Flutter framework. If you are using the Flutter framework, you can easily jump onto SwiftUI. And both of them, SwiftUI as well as Flutter, are inspired from React Native. So if you have been using React Native or React, you will feel also at home. So let's go ahead and get started. The best way to get started for these kind of project is to simply build a very simple application and see that how much they have in common. So over here, I'm going to go ahead and start Xcode and build the SwiftUI application. So let's go ahead and create a new project. You can see I'm using 11.3.1. I'm going to select the single view application. And I'm just going to say hello world SwiftUI. And we are going to build a counter application, which means that anytime we press an increment button, it's going to increment the count. And I know it's a very simple app, but you are going to learn about state and how the state is managed in SwiftUI versus how it is managed in Flutter. So this is our SwiftUI application, and if I go ahead and run this, you're going to see a simple hello world kind of a thing being displayed on the right hand side in the Xcode preview. So let it load first, and we'll be able to see that. And then we're going to jump into creating a Flutter app. So there we go. This is the starting point of our SwiftUI application. Now on a separate screen, I'm going to go ahead and launch VS Code. Now when you're creating applications for Flutter, you can use VS Code or you can use Android Studio. So I'm going to go to Command Palette. And you can see over here it says Flutter new project. And I'm going to go ahead and say hello world Flutter. One of the main differences when you are creating application in Flutter is that they do not use JavaScript, they use Dart language. So that's perfectly fine. I mean, I don't really have any hate or some disadvantages toward JavaScript. A language is a language, and I think if you have been programming for so long, languages should be kind of like a secondary thing. So you shouldn't really care about the languages at this particular time that, oh, it's using Dart, I hate Dart. A language is a language. All languages are very similar. Yes, you may have a preference that you like Swift better than Dart, but in the end, most of the language, all of the languages are very similar. Okay, now you can see that when you have this application VS Code, it's obviously there is no preview or anything. So I'm going to go ahead and start debugging. Since Flutter is a cross-platform application, I can actually run it on iOS Simulator or I can run it on Android. I'm just going to select iOS Simulator. You can even run it on both. So if I jump over here in the terminal, I can run a command that it will launch in both iOS Simulator as well as the Android emulator. So let's go ahead and run this application, which is already a counter application, by the way. All right. So we will have to remove all of this code and we will have to start from the beginning where it is not a counter application. So we'll start with kind of like a hello world kind of application. All right. So still trying to run. The good thing about this is that the first time it runs, it is going to take some time to run. You can see in the simulator, it is still working, still trying to run. But then you don't really have to stop on anything. You can just carry on with your code and it will automatically refresh or reload as you save your Flutter application. And all of this code that you see is basically Dart language, which is very similar to JavaScript, which is similar to Swift, which is similar to some other languages. So every language is kind of like similar to some other language. All right. You can see my CPU fans. You might be able to hear it, the CPU fans kind of kicking in right now because now my poor MacBook 13-inch is under a lot of stress. And we're just waiting for it to run. So let's go ahead and wait a little bit more so that it can run. and we'll be able to see our application running on iOS. Now, this will be the entire counter application, so we'll actually have to remove the code. Just wanted to show you how the default application looks like when you are creating your Flutter app. So there we go. This is our default application, and it's a complete counter application, meaning it works fine. But we don't want all of that. We want to start from the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and remove all of this stuff and start from the beginning. All right. So over here, what we are doing is that we are saying that the main application, the main function is going to get fired, and it's going to run this app, which is a class, which by the way doesn't exist. So let's go ahead and add that. Extends stateless widget. Stateless widget basically means that this particular widget, which is called app, cannot maintain the state. The concept of state is very similar, exactly the same as in React and as in SwiftUI. So let's go ahead and get started. The only function, the required function that we need to implement is the build function. And if you jump over to the SwiftUI, the only property we need to implement is a body function, which is going to return you a view, which is a text view. And over here, we have to implement the build function, which is going to return you a widget, which is kind of like a view. Right now, it's not really returning anything. That's fine. We can actually make it return something. So return material app. Now, what exactly is a material app? A material app simply means that the app that we are building will use the material interfaces. It will be inside this skin or this container, which will be a material app container, which is primarily used for Android application, but even on iOS it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and give some sort of a title of this application. We can say hello world, and the home, meaning the first page that we will have, will be the scaffold. Now, what exactly is scaffold? All right, so let me actually go ahead and type a little bit of code, and I can show you what exactly is scaffold. Title, text, and I'm going to say over here, hello Flutter, and yes, you have to put semicolon over there. Let me go ahead and do a hot restart. This button, the refresh button, is a hot restart, and now we have a navigation bar at the top, and our page is set up. So material app is simply used to contain your whole application inside a container, which is basically used for Android devices, but you can see that it looks great on iOS also. It uses the material controls, their styles, their backgrounds, their foregrounds, and all of those kind of effects. The scaffold is simply a scaffolding feature, meaning that if you use scaffold, it is going to allow you to easily create the app bar, which is the top bar that you can see, and set some sort of a control, which we are setting it up as a text control, which is simply saying hello Flutter. But the other property of the app bar, which we haven't used, or the scaffold, which we haven't used, is the actual body property. So I can go ahead and create a body property, and I can say hello world over here, which means that it will appear in the body. So this is the top bar, the top part, and this whole thing is the body. So if I go ahead and save it, you can see that the hello world is being appearing, just like the hello world is being appeared in our SwiftUI application. Now, obviously, the hello world over here is not really in the center, so I can go ahead and right click on it and refactor, and you can see that I can add a different kind of, I can wrap with center, or I can wrap with many different kind of widgets. As soon as I wrap with the center widget, it's in the center. All right, pretty simple, right? And this is the cool thing of using or writing Flutter in VS Code, is that there are a lot of plugins that you can use and a lot of refactoring tools. So if I right click on it and if I say refactor, you can see I can do a lot of different stuff with it, which is pretty cool. And this feature is also available, obviously, in SwiftUI. If I go ahead and click over here and say command click, I can, here we go. You can see embed in VStack, embed in HStack, embed in list, and all that stuff. It's also available in Xcode also. Let's go ahead and make the size of the text a little bit bigger over here. Hello world is great, but it's a little bit small. So I'm going to use the style property, and this will be a text style where I can supply the font size. And let's go with 24, save it. Oh, again, I did it wrong. You can see I put the style right over here for my hello Flutter title. I didn't want it to do that. Let's go back, save it. Okay, that's perfect. And what I am going to do is, let's go ahead and say format document. All right, so in the text, I can go ahead and say style, which is text style. And I can say font size, and I can say maybe 24, save it. And hello world is now bigger, much better. And this is another one of the cool features if you're using VS Code with Flutter, is that you can right click and say format document, and it's going to try to format document, make it look nice. While on this, if you create certain hierarchy, then it goes kind of like on the right direction, and there is no format document. At least I don't really know, or maybe it's not even available to format a document into a nice hierarchy. Maybe it will be available in the future. Hopefully it will. All right, so the next step, so we are pretty close of creating at least the similar interface. You can see on SwiftUI on Xcode preview, we have hello world in the center. That's great. And over here in Flutter, we also have hello world right in the center. The next thing, we'll start with SwiftUI. We need to add a button. So I'm going to go ahead and use a V-stack, which is a vertical stack. So I can add another control over here. I'm going to go ahead and add a button control. I will call it increment. There we go. Let's go ahead and save it so I can see the increment button. Maybe I can even go ahead and check out some, or set up some sort of blue color as a background. Well, maybe not blue because the text color is blue. Actually, blue might be okay. Let's go ahead and check out the foreground color also. And we'll say color.white. All right, maybe a little bit of a padding will definitely help. Dot padding. All right, maybe too much padding, but we have a little bit of padding over here. We can actually give some sort of a padding if you want, or I don't know what padding we can use. 10 is fine. And just to make it a little bit more better, we can also add corner radius of whatever, 16. Okay, that's way too much. Let's go ahead and add 10. Great. That looks fine. I mean, you can add, you can remove the corner radius if you want to. Maybe it's too much. Maybe 6 might be okay. Okay, perfect. So we got the button to be displayed. That's great. All right, so now let's go ahead and move to the Flutter side and add a button. So I'm going to go and move to Flutter. Now, currently we have all of the stuff inside the center widget. I'm going to click on, or right click on the text widget, and I'm going to say refactor and wrap with a column, which is very similar or exactly the same as the V-stack, the vertical stack. All right. Now, one thing you will notice is that as soon as we put inside the column, it goes in the top. So we have to make sure that it is not in the top, so we can actually check out the main axis alignment, and we can set it to center, and now everything is in the center. So all the elements inside the column are now in the center. Currently, we only have text, and make sure that this is inside the children. You can see the column has a children property, which is an array of widgets. So I can go ahead and add a button over here, but you will see that there is no such thing as button. You have different kind of buttons. The one that we are looking for is the flat button. All right, here we go. And we will go ahead and set the child to be text, and we will say increment. If I save it, you can actually see the increment button being displayed. That's great. Let's go ahead and give it some sort of a color. So I'm going to go ahead and say colors.blue or something. And it doesn't appear because I still need to increment on pressed. And let's go ahead and save it. And now we have the button. On press is basically the on click on the button. And you can see it's going to fire this function where the function doesn't really have any body. It's not really going to do anything. Other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that the text over here of the button is actually white. Right now it's black, so I'm going to set the style. Oops, there we go. Style text style. And you can see that one of the properties is color. So let's go ahead and check out the colors. Colors dot white. Let's go ahead and save it. And now you can see that it says in white color. Great. So we're getting close. This is really cool. So now both of the interfaces looks exactly the same. You can see Hello World with the increment button, and you can see Hello World with the increment button. You even can round this off. You will have to maybe put it in a container or something. I don't know if they have a corner radius property, or it's not over here, but there are ways to do that also if you want to do that. You have to maybe wrap this around with a container and style the container. Anyway, okay, so we have the button, and now when we click the button, nothing really happens because, well, we haven't really written any code over here. So what we need to do is to update this Hello World and display some sort of a, well, whenever we increment some sort of a number over here, right? In SwiftUI, you can use the power of state. So let's go ahead and create state, private var, and I can say just say counter, which is of type integer, and we'll start the state with 0. This means that whenever you set the counter value, since this is decorated with a property wrapper at state, whenever it changes, it's going to fire or render the whole body again, or the whole interface again. When the button is pressed, which is on line number 19, I can simply say counter plus equals to 1. Basically, I'm incrementing the state. And I know that whenever I will increment the state, the whole body is going to get fired, and this is my opportunity to put the updated value in the text. So I can simply go ahead and say, put the value of counter. You don't have to say self, but I usually say self. Let's go ahead and resume this. So initially, this value should be 0. There we go. It's actually 0 because we initialize a counter to be 0. Now if I go ahead and run the application and increment, it's going to increment. Line number 19 is going to get executed. Whenever it will increment, it's going to fire the body again, render the body again, and the updated counter value will be displayed. Cool, right? So we were able to do that in SwiftUI pretty quickly. It works fine. It's great. The counter is done. All right. Now let's move to Flutter. How do we do that in Flutter? Now the first thing you will notice is we are using something called a stateless widget. And by the way, in Flutter, the state management can be done in many different ways. There is a built-in state that I'm going to show you. You can use a notifier, and you can use a providers pattern, you can use a block pattern, you can use Redux and MobX. There's so many different things, but I'm going to show you the simplest one, which is like the built-in one. All right. Unfortunately, our app widget inherits from the stateless widget. Stateless, which means that, well, it can't really do anything with the state. The good news is that you can actually change this to a stateful widget. The bad news is that you have to create a separate class. So let's go ahead and create a class. I'm going to create a separate class. I will call it app state. The underscore kind of shows that this is more of a private class that we are making. You can write any name that you want for your class. It doesn't have to be app state, but usually that's a convention which will indicate that this state belongs to the app class or app widget. So this is going to be extending the state for the app. All right. Now what will happen is that this particular stateless is going to go away, and we will replace it with the stateful widget. Stateful widget, when you have something called stateful widget, you can't really have a build function in there. So I'm going to remove this build function, and I'm going to add this build function into the state. But the stateful widget, if you're inheriting from there, you still do need to implement some required function. And one of those required function is called the create state function, which is going to return to you, which is going to, and sometimes I get confused that if it's a double arrow or a single. Here we go. So it's going to return you the app state. That's the management, and I'm just going to say over here app state is going to be get returned. All right, let's go ahead and do a hot reset, because whenever you convert a class from a stateless widget to a stateful widget, sometime you will see some errors over here. So you have to do a hot restart, this refresh button. And you can see that nothing really changed. I mean, it's appearing exactly like before. But now we have this widget underscore app state, which is responsible, or which can maintain a state, because it is maintaining a state of the app widget, which is a stateful widget. So how would we maintain a state? Well, the first thing we need is some sort of a variable to hold the counter value. So I'm going to go ahead and create an integer variable. I will call it underscore counter. Underscore simply means that this is a private variable. It's not accessible outside this particular class. Okay, so on press, we can do underscore counter plus equals to 1. This is not really going to work, because whenever you are trying to update the state, you have to call set state. And inside the set state function, you will say counter plus equals to 1, or plus plus, or whatever you want to do. All right. So since the counter is updated inside the set state function, this means that when this gets updated, the build function fires again, and this is our opportunity to update the interface, which we actually do want to do. We want to update line number 19 so that we can print out the current value of the counter. So how do we inject the counter? Well, you'll simply use the $, underscore, and counter. So $, underscore is string interpolation, which is similar in Swift. I guess in Swift you use something like this. That's not going to work over here. This is Flutter using Dart. So you have to use $, and then the name of the variable, it will be injected over there. Let's go ahead and do a hot restart just in case. And let's go ahead and increment the counter, and there we go. Now the good thing about this is that this is working on iOS simulator over here, but if you try to run it on an Android, it's going to work exactly the same way. So by creating this application in Flutter, you have targeted the iOS platform and also the Android platform. All right, and you can see that it's very similar. I mean, the whole concept of declarative interfaces, whether you are using the SwiftUI, which we used over here, or whether you are using the Flutter interface or the Flutter using Dart, it's very, very similar. So if you know Flutter, you can jump onto SwiftUI. If you know SwiftUI, you can jump onto Flutter. It's very, very similar. So that's always a good thing, that the knowledge that you have learned, you can transfer. You can jump from platform to platform. All right. So that's pretty much it. You saw the counter app being built in SwiftUI, and you saw the same exact app being built in Flutter. If you want to learn more about how to build SwiftUI applications, then check out my course, SwiftUI Declarative Interfaces for Any Apple Device. This is the best-selling course and the most comprehensive course available. You can see that I have more than 2,500 students enrolled with great rating. It's a 13+ hour course, and it covers everything that you ever need to know about SwiftUI. It also includes MVVM design pattern, how to implement MVVM design pattern to create an application that will integrate with a JSON API, and it even covers topics such as core data with SwiftUI and much, much more. Apart from this course, if you want to learn about Flutter, then I have a brand new course, the ultimate hands-on Flutter and MVVM build real projects. And when I talk about build real projects, you will be building real projects. This is such a great course because you will be hands down in creating actual application, the news app from the news API, where you will display the actual latest news from the world, a place finder application which will integrate with Google Maps and Google Places, city care application where you can take pictures of a broken traffic light or a pothole and upload it to the server, and also the Hacker News application using the Hacker News API. So this is a very practical course. It is a little bit intermediate level course or advanced course, so this is not a big for beginners, but if you want to learn how to build real world applications, then this is a course for you. Now, in order to get this course, check out the YouTube description and you can get links to the course, click on the link and you will get the best discount. So one only recommendation that I have is that please use the YouTube links that I have placed for you. You will get the best deals for the course. And thank you so much. And I really hope that you have enjoyed this video.